She asked a question no one expected. 4 words that cut through the hum of the crowd, through the blistering San Diego heat, through the silent pride that hung over Coronado Beach. Mind if I try? For a moment the world held its breath. Even the gulls that circled the base seemed to pause. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Laughter from the tour groups died away, replaced by stunned silence. It was absurd, wasn't it? A woman in a Broncos t-shirt, 5'4" in hiking boots, asking to run the course that had broken men twice her size. Asking to touch the sacred ground of the Navy SEALs obstacle course, a monument to sweat, blood, and 12 years of undefeated endurance. But she wasn't laughing, she wasn't joking, she wasn't even smiling. Her gaze was steady, quiet, surgical. And in that instant, I realized I had seen that look before. It wasn't the look of a tourist. It wasn't even the look of someone trying to prove herself. It was the expression Cellini always wore when standing beside a hospital bed, watching a wounded soldier take their first trembling steps. It was the gaze of someone who lived in the shadows between despair and hope, someone who had built her life on restoring the broken. But no one here knew that. To them, she was just my sister, just another civilian watching the SEALs display their impossible strength. She had been underestimated her whole life. Even by me. Especially by me. That morning when I walked her past the grinder, I'd carried our family story like a shield. I was the warrior. She was the gentle one. I was the protector. She was the one we sheltered. Dad had told us that 1,000 times over the years, ruffling my hair while calling her his gentle soul. Mom had wrapped her in care like porcelain, and I had followed suit, carrying her groceries, lifting her suitcases, stepping in before the world could even think of testing her. It was second nature, it was love, it was protection. But protection can also be a prison. I didn't see that until the moment she whispered those words, "Mind if I try?" The crowd didn't know what to do with it. Some chuckled, nervous and dismissive, like they'd misheard. Others glanced at each other, half expecting an officer to laugh it off and move things along. Even I wasn't sure whether to pull her aside or let the madness play out. But Cellini stood her ground. Her chin lifted slightly, not with arrogance but with something harder to define. Determination, maybe even defiance. The officers looked at each other, confused. The master chief in charge, Rodriguez, scanned the crowd to see if anyone was joking. His weathered face betrayed disbelief. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. What did you say?" Cellini's voice didn't waver. I asked if I could attempt the course. The silence that followed was suffocating. I could feel the heat prickling on the back of my neck. I wanted to step in, to laugh it off for her, to save her from what I assumed was about to be humiliation. But I didn't move. Something about her tone made me stay still. Lieutenant Commander Hayes, sharp and polished in his uniform, stepped forward with a smile that carried more condescension than warmth. "Miss, this isn't American Ninja Warrior. This course is designed to test warriors who have trained their entire adult lives for combat." The chuckles grew louder. A few phones came up, recording, not because they expected greatness, but because they smelled embarrassment brewing. Cellini didn't flinch. "I understand the physical requirements," she replied, calm and measured. "I'm a doctor of physical therapy. I specialize in combat injury rehabilitation." That should have meant something, but to them it didn't. Hayes' smile widened, sharp as a blade. "Well, doctor, perhaps you'd be more comfortable on our junior course, much more appropriate for civilians." The laughter stung like acid in my stomach. I knew that tone. She'd heard it her whole life, from classmates who said she was too small for sports, from teachers who told her she wasn't built for physical work, from relatives who still cut her meat at Christmas as if she were too delicate to manage a knife. And I'd played my part in it too. Every time I carried her bags, every time I said I'll handle it without asking, I'd reinforced the lie, that she wasn't enough. But instead of shrinking back like I half expected, Selene stepped forward. Her eyes never left the course. "Master Chief Rodriguez," she said, her voice steady as surgical steel. "I'm not asking to join the SEALs. I'm asking for one attempt at an obstacle course. I think I can beat that record." The air went heavy, too bold, too reckless, too impossible. And then from the back of the crowd came a gravelly voice. "Doc Hartwell, is that you?" We turned. A man emerged, Chief Boston's mate Tors. His scarred forearms told his story before his words did. His eyes lit up with recognition. Selene smiled for the first time that afternoon. "Chief Tors, how's that shoulder treating you?" "Like $1,000,000, thanks to you." He turned to the others. "Boys, this lady got half my platoon walking again after that IED in Kandahar. If Doc Hartwell wants to run this course, she's earned the right." Murmurs rippled. Rodriguez studied Tors, then Selene. "You know her professionally." "Better than most doctors I ever met. She rebuilt my rotator cuff when 3 others said I was done. Got Sergeant Martinez running again when his leg was shredded. Had Corpsman Johnson back on duty when his back was gone. She understands warrior bodies better than most warriors understand themselves." Hayes bristled, clearly annoyed. "Chief, with all due respect, physical therapy and obstacle courses are different things entirely." But Selene wasn't listening to him. She walked to the starting line. Her movements were deliberate, analytical. She studied the rope climb not with awe but with calculation. She traced the tire sequence with her eyes like a surgeon rehearsing incisions. At the wall climb, she measured the distance, as if weighing physics against muscle. "You're all approaching this wrong," she said suddenly, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "You're powering through each obstacle instead of creating flow. You're fighting the course instead of working with it. The human body is designed for efficiency, not brute force. I teach that every day." Gasps, whispers, the audacity of it. But her tone wasn't arrogant, it was clinical, honest. And for the first time, Rodriguez's weathered eyes softened with interest. "All right, doctor," he said at last. "Full safety protocols, medical waiver, and you get one attempt. But understand, this course will test every fiber of your being." Selene peeled off her jacket, revealing lean arms honed by years of demonstrating perfect movement to soldiers who had lost theirs. Not bulky, not intimidating, but carved by repetition, by precision, by discipline. "That's exactly what I'm counting on," she said. Rodriguez raised his stopwatch. "On my mark, 3, 2, 1, go." And Selene moved. Not with brute force, not with hesitation, but with a fluidity that stunned even me. The rope climb, the monster that chewed through upper bodies like paper, became her stage. She wrapped legs and arms in harmony, using push and pull together, scaling it like gravity was nothing more than a suggestion. She reached the top in half the time it had taken the strongest SEAL before her. The crowd stirred. At the tire sequence, where men had wasted strength flipping dead weight, she used leverage, timing, a twist of physics instead of a war against it. The massive tires rolled forward in a rhythm that seemed almost graceful. "Holy hell," someone whispered, "she's flying through this." At the wall climb, where giants had relied on raw power, she became momentum itself. Sprint, leap, catch, swing, over, effortless. The crowd erupted into cheers. Phones came up. Spectators realized they weren't just watching an attempt. They were watching something history would not forget. Even I couldn't move. I could only watch, tears burning at the edge of my vision, as my sister, my fragile, protected sister, moved through that course with the kind of strength no one had ever recognized. And in that moment, I realized something that cut deeper than any injury I'd ever carried. We never protected her. She'd been protecting us. The stopwatch ticked. Selene was already moving like the course had been designed for her body, her rhythm. The first obstacles fell behind her as if they had never been a challenge at all. The SEALs had attacked each section with raw power, bodies straining, lungs screaming. But Selene, she flowed. Every move was threaded into the next. The rope climb wasn't separate from the tires weren't separate from the wall. She didn't see obstacles. She saw a pattern. I stood frozen, heart hammering in my chest, as she cleared the rope traverse with a speed that made veterans widen their eyes. 5 years of teaching wounded soldiers how to reclaim motion, how to make every grip count, every pull efficient. That knowledge wasn't theory. It was written in her muscles, and now it was on display for the world to see. The crowd leaned forward as one, even the skeptical ones, even Hayes, who had been so ready to dismiss her. His folded arms loosened, his jaw slackened. She wasn't supposed to do this. She wasn't supposed to be faster, stronger, better. But she was. At the wall climb, she hit the surface running. Her foot planted, her momentum carried her higher than anyone thought possible. She grabbed the edge, swung, and vaulted over in one motion. Gasps erupted. Some clapped. Some just stared, mouths open. I felt something rising in me, a heat that wasn't pride, not yet. It was awe and guilt. Because all these years I had carried the story of who she was, and now it was burning to ash in front of my eyes. I remembered Christmas dinners where Dad cut her food like she was still a child. I remembered Mom carrying her luggage upstairs. I remembered myself grabbing every heavy bag before she could even reach for it. All of it felt small, patronizing. She had been strong all along, and we had refused to see it. "Come on, Doc," Chief Torres bellowed, his voice breaking the spell. "Show 'em how it's done." The course swallowed her whole, obstacle after obstacle, but she was carving a path no one else had found. She didn't fight the course. She danced with it. Her body moved in arcs, conserving energy, refusing to waste what wasn't needed. She was ahead of pace. I saw Rodriguez's weathered face tighten as he watched the stopwatch. His lips moved, muttering silent seconds. And then he looked up, eyes narrowed with something rare for a man like him, wonder. "She's on record time," someone whispered. No, not whispered, shouted. The words carried, and the crowd surged forward, clambering for a better view. Phones came up, screens recorded. History was unfolding. At the rope traverse, where 2 SEALs earlier had failed entirely, Selene moved hand over hand with control so perfect it seemed unreal. Her body stayed parallel to the rope, legs locked, breathing steady. Every technique she'd taught to men broken by war was now hers to wield. Whispers turned to cheers. And I wanted to cry. Not just because she was doing it, but because I could finally see her for who she was. Not fragile, not delicate, not porcelain. She was forged steel. She didn't just belong here. She was redefining the course itself. The cargo net loomed, the final giant, the place where speed died for even the best. But she didn't hesitate. She hit the net with precision, arms and legs finding their marks in seamless rhythm. She rose higher, faster. Every placement calculated, like spider silk in motion. The finish line waited. Rodriguez's thumb hovered over the stopwatch. His eyes never left her. The crowd fell silent again, as if they all realized in unison that they were about to witness the impossible. Selene dropped from the cargo net, hit the ground running, and surged across the line. The stopwatch beeped. Rodriguez looked down, his face froze. His mouth opened, but no words came. For a heartbeat, the world stayed suspended. Selene stood there, chest heaving, sweat beading her forehead. She glanced at the stopwatch, not with arrogance, but with the cool focus of someone who needed to know, not someone who wanted applause. 2 minutes 8 seconds, Rodriguez whispered. Then louder, his voice breaking with disbelief. 2 minutes 8 seconds. The course record, Patterson's 12-year untouchable reign. 4,380 days of elite warriors falling short. Shattered by 6 full seconds. The silence lasted only 1 heartbeat. Then the eruption came. The crowd roared, an explosion of cheers and disbelief. Cell phones rose higher, recording history from shaky hands. SEALs who had watched with skepticism rushed forward, clapping, shouting. Some just shook their heads, grinning like children. It was chaos, beautiful, stunned chaos. But I couldn't move. I stood there, tears burning down my face before I realized they were falling, watching my sister, my fragile sister, my protected sister, catching her breath, wiping sweat from her brow, surrounded by warriors who now looked at her like she had performed a miracle. Because she had. Master Chief Rodriguez walked toward her. Slowly, almost reverently, he extended his hand. His voice carried a weight I had never heard before. Dr. Hartwell, in 23 years of military service, I've never seen anything like that. Would you mind if we logged your technique for training analysis? She was still catching her breath, but her smile came quietly, humbly. Of course, I'd be honored to help. Hayes stepped forward, the same man who had laughed, who had told her she didn't belong. His face was pale now, his arrogance melted away. He struggled for words. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology. That was extraordinary. What you just did will be talked about for years." Chief Torres was grinning so wide it seemed his face might split. "Doc, you just became a Coronado legend. 12 years from now, when some hotshot tries this again, they'll talk about the day Selene Hartwell redefined what's possible." But in the storm of celebration, Selene found me. Her eyes cut through the crowd, through the noise, through the applause. She walked toward me, sweat still shining on her skin. "Devon," she said softly, "what's wrong?" I shook my head, my throat tightened, the words clawed their way out. "Nothing's wrong, everything's right. I've been an idiot. I spent so many years trying to protect you. I never realized you didn't need protecting. You've been fighting battles I couldn't even see, winning wars I never knew existed." Her hand landed on my shoulder, gentle, steady, strong. The same hand that had guided broken soldiers back to their feet. "Devon," she whispered, "I didn't break this record to prove anything to them, or to you. I broke it to prove something to myself, and maybe to show anyone who's been told they're not enough, that strength comes in forms we don't always recognize." The cheers went on, the applause thundered. But in that moment the world shrank to just us. Brother and sister, protector and protected, both roles flipped inside out. And I understood something I had never seen before. Sometimes the person you think needs protecting is the one who has been protecting everyone else all along. They said the echo of that stopwatch carried farther than the surf. 2 minutes and 8 seconds. 6 seconds faster than the record that had been carved into Coronado legend. But the record was only the beginning. Because once the cheers died down, once the shock settled into awe, once the crowd dispersed with their stories to tell, something else began. Something harder, something quieter. The SEALs couldn't ignore it. For 12 years the course had stood untouched, a measuring stick of human limits. And in the span of 2 minutes, one woman, civilian, outsider, underestimated, had rewritten its meaning. That night I lay awake replaying the sound of her voice, the calm certainty in those 4 words, "Mind if I try." It haunted me, in the best and worst ways. I thought about my own discharge, about how my career had ended in a single shattering twist of my ankle. How I had believed with every fiber of my being that strength meant uniform, deployment, grit carved into muscle and bone. And then I thought about her, about the battles she'd fought, not on desert sands or jungle trails, but in sterile hospital corridors and rehab centers. She'd spent years staring broken men in the eyes, men who thought their lives were over, and telling them quietly, "Try again. One more step, one more rep. You're not finished yet." Strength had always been in her. I just never had the courage to see it. The next morning, Coronado wasn't the same. Word had spread through the base like wildfire. Some called her a fluke. Some called her a prodigy. Some didn't know what to call her at all. But no one ignored her anymore. Selene hadn't asked for the attention. She didn't strut, didn't gloat, didn't bask in it. She walked with the same steady pace she always had, her shoulders relaxed, her smile soft. She treated the whole thing like it was just another day in the clinic. Another patient, another milestone. But I could see the weight pressing in. The whispers followed her. Some were respectful, some weren't. Never seen anything like it. She embarrassed half the unit. Yeah, but it was technique, not strength. Doesn't mean anything. Try telling that to the stopwatch. The comments slid through the air like blades. And Selene, she absorbed them all in silence. That afternoon, Rodriguez called her in. She thought it was to debrief the record, but it was more, much more. Inside the office, Rodriguez sat across from her, arms folded, face unreadable. Hayes was there too, stiff in his chair, his pride still bruised. And Torres leaning back with a grin, clearly enjoying the shift in tides. Rodriguez cleared his throat. "Dr. Hartwell, I'll get straight to it. What you did yesterday wasn't just impressive, it was instructive. Your efficiency, your flow, it exposed weaknesses in how we approach the course. I want your insight." Selene tilted her head. "My insight. We've been training for years on power, endurance, grit. But you didn't fight the course. You used it. If there's something we're missing, something that could give these men an edge, I'd be a fool not to ask." For the first time since I'd known him, Rodriguez sounded humble. Hayes didn't like it. His jaw tightened. "With all due respect, sir, this was a civilian demonstration. It doesn't equate to combat readiness." Rodriguez shot him a glance that cut through the room. "And with all due respect, Lieutenant Commander, I don't give a damn. We measure results, and her result is a record broken. That matters." The silence hung heavy. Selene breathed slowly, measuring her words. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone," she said softly. "I'm here because I believe the human body has more potential than most people ever let it show. You train your men to endure pain. I train broken men to find movement again. Somewhere between those worlds, maybe there's something useful." Rodriguez leaned forward. "Then teach us." And just like that, Selene wasn't just the woman who had broken the record. She was a consultant to the SEALs. That night I found her sitting by the beach. The waves hissed against the shore, carrying the salt air into her hair. She sat with her knees drawn up, arms wrapped loosely around them, staring at the endless dark of the ocean. I sat beside her. Neither of us spoke at first. The silence between us was thick but not heavy, just full. Finally, I broke it. "You realize you changed everything, right?" Her laugh was soft, tired. "I didn't change anything, I just ran a course." "No, Selene, you shattered the story, not just theirs, mine too." Her eyes stayed on the waves. "You've always seen yourself as the warrior." "Yeah," I swallowed. "And I always saw you as the one I needed to protect." Her lips pressed together, her chin dipped. For the first time, I saw the shadow behind her calm. "Do you know what that feels like, Devon? To spend your life being treated like glass. To have people you love most, your own family, carry your bags, cut your food, tell you you're delicate, even while you're carrying other people's lives in your hands." Her voice cracked just slightly. I looked at her then, really looked. Not at the sister I thought I knew, but at the woman beside me. "You were stronger than me all along," I whispered. Her eyes finally met mine. There was no triumph in them, only a quiet sadness, and maybe relief. "I didn't want to be stronger than you," she said. "I just wanted to be seen." The waves crashed, my throat burned. I wanted to apologize, to beg forgiveness, but words felt too small. So I sat there, letting the silence carry what I couldn't say. Days passed. Selene worked with the SEALs, showing them techniques they'd never considered. Small adjustments, breathing patterns, flow instead of fight. She wasn't trying to outshine them. She was trying to share what she knew. Some resisted. Some mocked her behind her back, but others listened. And slowly respect grew. The record was history now. But the real story was unfolding quietly, in the way hardened warriors began watching her with new eyes, not as a fluke, not as an outsider, but as someone who understood something they didn't. And me. I struggled. Watching her, I felt proud, but I also felt broken, because I couldn't escape the shadow of my own failure. My ankles still ached with every step, a reminder of what I'd lost. She had stepped into a new light, and I was fading into the background. One night I said it out loud, "Selene, I don't know who I am anymore." Her answer was simple. "You're my brother." It didn't fix everything, but maybe it was a place to start. And maybe, just maybe, the record she broke wasn't just on that board. It was inside me too. The record board didn't stay quiet for long. By the end of the week, her name was etched in black marker at the top, S. Hartwell 208. For the first time in 12 years, Patterson's myth was broken, and the walls of Coronado carried a new story. But records don't live on boards, they live in voices. And soon, the voices spilled out beyond the base. A tourist's shaky phone video hit social media. A woman in a Broncos t-shirt tearing through the seal obstacle course like it was child's play. The stopwatch freeze at 2:08. The eruption of cheers. The face of a master chief who looked like he'd seen a ghost. The clip spread fast. Military forums, news blogs, morning shows. Civilian breaks seal record. People argued in comments, in kitchens, in classrooms. Was it luck? Was it skill? Was it staged? Could she have been coached? Some praised her, some mocked her, but no one ignored her. Selene hated it. Everywhere she went, whispers followed. On base, men who had trained for years stared at her as if she'd invaded their home. Outside the gates, reporters lingered, asking for interviews, for a soundbite, for anything they could twist into a headline. She gave them nothing. Not because she was hiding, but because she knew what they wanted. They didn't want her truth. They wanted a spectacle. At night, she came back to the small apartment we shared off base, her shoulders heavier than I'd ever seen. "They're making me into something I'm not," she muttered once, dropping her bag onto the couch. "You broke the record, Selene," I said carefully. "That's what happens." Her laugh was hollow. "I broke a record. I didn't volunteer to be their symbol." I didn't know what to say, because deep down I understood. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't sought glory. All she'd wanted was one attempt, one chance to measure herself. And now the world wanted to measure her against everything else. The SEAL community itself was divided. Some men welcomed her into the training sessions with curiosity, listening when she explained how a slight shift in hip alignment could conserve energy. Others scoffed, muttering about flukes and publicity stunts. "Doesn't count, she's not under combat stress. Give her a 50-pound pack and see what happens." Technique one thing, war's another. She heard it all, and though she smiled politely, it cut her deeper than she let on. One afternoon, after a session where she demonstrated efficient rope climbing for a group of skeptical trainees, I found her in the locker room, sitting on a bench, hands trembling as she unwrapped tape from her wrists. "You okay?" I asked. She shook her head. "I don't know who I am to them. To half of them I'm a joke. To the other half I'm some kind of savior. And to me," she trailed off, staring at her hands, "I'm just me." Her voice cracked on the last word. And for the first time, I realized breaking the record wasn't the hardest thing she'd done. Living with it was. That night she stood by the window, staring out at the city lights. "Do you know what the cruelest part is, Devon?" she whispered. "I didn't even do it for them. I did it for me. And now they've taken it away." I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that no one could take away what she'd done. But I didn't, because she was right. The purity of her attempt, the quiet need to prove something to herself, was being swallowed by the noise of the world. The next week it got worse. A national outlet picked up the story. They called her the woman who humbled the SEALs. The headline stung like salt in an open wound. She never wanted to humiliate anyone. She respected them more than most civilians ever could. She turned down every request for interviews, every request for appearances, but the calls didn't stop. Neither did the attention. The SEAL leadership tried to manage it. Rodriguez shielded her where he could, but even he couldn't stop the storm. "She's a distraction," Hayes snapped one day after a session. "Our men don't need folklore, they need focus." Rodriguez fixed him with a glare. "Our men need the truth, and the truth is she did what none of them could." The tension hung heavy. And Selene, she just kept showing up, quiet, professional, refusing to let the noise change her. But at night, when the cameras were gone, I saw the toll, the sleeplessness, the distant stare, the way she curled into herself on the couch as if trying to disappear into silence. One night I asked her outright, "If you could go back, would you still do it? Would you still step onto that course?" Her answer was immediate. "Yes." Her eyes met mine, steady, unflinching, because it wasn't about them. It was about me, and I needed to know. The words settled deep into me, because I knew what she meant. I needed to know too. All my life, I had tied my worth to the uniform, to the deployments I'd never finish, to the missions I'd never run, and when that ankle shattered, I thought my purpose had shattered with it. But watching her, I realized something. Purpose isn't given by the world, it's chosen. She chose hers in a moment of courage, and now she was carrying the weight of it. The irony wasn't lost on me. The world saw her as unstoppable, but in the quiet of our apartment I saw the cracks, the fragility behind the legend. Not weakness, humanity. And maybe that was what made her stronger than any of us. Still, I couldn't shake the question. How long could she bear the weight of being turned into something she never asked to be? How long before the symbol crushed the person? And in the weeks that followed, I began to see the answer forming. Because strength isn't just about breaking records. It's about surviving what comes after. They didn't want her at first. Not really. Some of them nodded respectfully. Some even clapped her on the back. But beneath it all, I could feel it, the unease, the discomfort, the way men who had spent their lives earning the trident looked at Selene and saw something they couldn't explain. She was a civilian, a woman, a therapist. And yet she had done what none of them had. That was the fracture. Rodriguez, though, didn't care about optics. He cared about results, and he wasn't blind to what he had seen. "Dr. Hartwell," he said one morning, his tone brisk, "you're going to sit in on evaluations this week. I want your eyes on movement, efficiency, anything we've been missing." Selene blinked. "You want me to assess the SEAL candidates? I want you to tell me what you see." Hayes bristled. "I swear you could see the vein in his temple pulse. Sir, with all due respect, this undermines the integrity of the program. These men didn't come here to be analyzed by someone who beat their record," Rodriguez cut in. His voice didn't rise, but the weight in it silenced the room. "Our job isn't to protect tradition, Lieutenant Commander. It's to forge warriors who survive. If she has knowledge that helps them, we use it. That's the mission." And just like that, Selene was pulled into a world she had never asked to join. The next day she stood on the sidelines of the grinder, clipboard in hand, watching a fresh class of candidates run through the gauntlet. They were stripped down to raw determination, faces hard, bodies screaming. Sand clung to their skin, sweat burned their eyes. The air smelled of salt and blood. I watched her eyes move, always studying. Calculating, she didn't see broken men. She saw potential, she saw adjustments. "His left knee's collapsing inward," she murmured. "He's compensating. Give it 6 months, he's injured." "Too much shoulder rotation," she noted of another. "He's wasting energy." One by one, she pointed out flaws invisible to the naked eye. And when Rodriguez asked her to demonstrate, she did. Calmly, clinically, her movements smooth as water. The candidates watched, some skeptical, some wide-eyed. They weren't used to seeing their instructors nod in agreement with a civilian, but they couldn't deny the truth in her words. Not all of them welcomed it. Afterward, I overheard two men in the locker room. "Great, now we've got a tourist gradding us." "She's not a tourist, man. Did you see her run?" "Doesn't matter, she's not one of us." Those words cut deeper than they realized, because they weren't wrong. Selene wasn't one of them. She never would be. And maybe that was why she could see what they couldn't. Still, the pushback grew louder. Hayes pulled her aside one evening, his jaw tight, his tone clipped. "Do you know what you're doing here, doctor? You're upsetting balance. These men live and die on trust, on tradition. You think you're helping, but you're making them question everything." Selene didn't flinch. Maybe what they're questioning isn't trust, maybe it's ego. I thought Hayes would explode, but instead he just stared at her, eyes cold. "You'll never belong here, remember that." She didn't answer, she didn't need to. But that night I saw the weight in her shoulders, the exhaustion behind her eyes. She was caught in a war she hadn't asked for, a war between respect and resentment, between recognition and rejection. And all she had wanted was to prove something to herself. I couldn't help wondering, was I part of the problem too? Because while she was fighting for a place she didn't even want, I was sitting in the shadows, my own life unraveling. My discharge papers sat on the table, staring at me like an accusation. 8 years of service, reduced to a paragraph and a stamp. A broken ankle had ended it all. And now, I didn't know who I was without the uniform. I watched my sister, my fragile sister, step into the fire and hold her ground, and I felt small, useless. One night I told her the truth. "I don't know how to be anything else," I whispered. "Without the Navy, I'm nothing." Selene turned to me, her eyes fierce in the dim light. "Don't you dare say that." "Selene." "No," her voice cut sharp. "You think strength is only about combat, Devon. You think service is only measured by the missions you finish. I've spent my life with men who thought they were nothing after they lost a limb, and I've watched them walk again, run again, live again, because they realized their story wasn't over." Her hand gripped mine, strong, unshakable. "Neither is yours." Her words hit harder than any training blow I'd ever taken. Because deep down I knew she was right. I had let the discharge define me. I had let it steal my identity. But maybe it didn't have to. Maybe there was still a way to serve. The days turned into weeks. Selene kept showing up, teaching, advising, ignoring the whispers. And little by little, things shifted. Candidates began seeking her out quietly, asking questions, listening. How do I keep my shoulder from locking up? Is there a better way to pace through the tires? What do I do when my knee feels like it's going to give? And she answered every one, patient, steady. Rodriguez saw it too. The way her influence wasn't just physical, it was mental. She was teaching them resilience, but in a different language, one built on recovery, not destruction. But Hayes, he only grew colder. I could see it in his eyes whenever he watched her, not just skepticism, resentment. To him, she was a threat. And threats don't last long in places like this. The storm was coming. And I couldn't shake the fear that the course record had been the easy part. The real test, the one Selene never asked for, was only beginning. The storm didn't break all at once. It started as whispers, a sideways glance in the chow hall, a muttered joke in the locker room, a candidate who rolled his eyes just enough for her to catch it. None of it stopped her. But storms never announce themselves until they're on top of you. That morning, Selene stood beside Rodriguez at the grinder, clipboard in hand, watching another group of candidates run drills. The sun was merciless, the air thick with the smell of sweat and sand. She scanned the line of exhausted men, nodding posture, movement, the subtle signs of wear. One candidate's shoulder tilted slightly forward as he pushed through push-ups. Cellini stepped closer. Your scapula's collapsing inward. Keep it stable. Protect the rotator cuff. He adjusted. The movement smoothed out instantly. Small corrections, quiet victories. But Hayes was watching, and Hayes was tired of watching. "Doctor," he said suddenly, his voice sharp enough to cut glass, "step back." The candidate froze mid-rep. The rest of the line faltered, unsure of who to follow. Rodriguez glanced up, his eyes narrowing. "Sir?" Cellini asked carefully. "This is SEAL training," Hayes snapped. "Not a physical therapy clinic. These men aren't here to be coddled." The words hung in the air, acidic. Cellini's jaw tightened, but she didn't back away. "I wasn't coddling, I was preventing injury. These men are supposed to push past injury." "And then what?" Her voice sharpened now, echoing across the grinder. "You push them until their bodies break, until they're discharged, until they're limping for the rest of their lives. Is that the standard you want to set?" The silence was heavy, too heavy. Rodriguez broke it first. "That's enough, Hayes." But Hayes didn't look at Rodriguez. He looked at her, and his eyes were pure fire. That night Cellini came back to the apartment quiet. Too quiet. She dropped her bag on the floor, kicked off her boots, and sank into the couch without a word. I sat across from her, waiting. Finally she whispered, "He hates me." I wanted to deny it, to soften it, but the truth was too raw. "Yeah, he does." She stared at the ceiling. "Why? Because I proved him wrong, because I don't fit his picture." "Because you're changing the story," I said. Her eyes flicked to me. "And stories are dangerous, aren't they?" The next week the hostility bled into the candidates. Not all of them, just enough to feel it. A snicker when she gave instruction. A muttered, "Yes, ma'am," drenched in sarcasm. One even asked out loud, "What does she know about combat?" She answered with calm every time, patient, professional, but I could see the cracks forming under the weight. Late at night she sat at the table scribbling notes. I peeked once, pages filled with diagrams of human movement, efficiency, energy conservation. She was pouring herself into the work. But the shadows under her eyes grew darker. "You're burning out," I told her one night. She looked up, exhaustion etched into her face. "If I stop, Devon, they'll win. Hayes will win. And then every candidate who could have learned something, who could have been saved from breaking, will suffer for it." Her voice shook just slightly. That was the truth about Cellini. For all her strength, all her efficiency, all her resilience, she carried too much. Not because she had to, because she couldn't stand not to. And me. I sat there useless, watching. A brother who'd spent years trying to protect her and now couldn't even protect her from this. The breaking point came during a candidate evaluation. Cellini stood at the edge of the obstacle course, clipboard in hand, as the men ran in brutal succession. Dust kicked up into the air, mixing with shouts, grunts, the pounding of boots. One candidate hit the rope traverse wrong. His grip slipped, his arm wrenching in a way I'd seen before, the kind of movement that tears muscle clean. Cellini stepped forward instantly. "Stop him, he's about to." Hayes' voice cut across hers like a whip. "Continue." The candidate pushed forward. His scream tore through the air as his shoulder gave. He dropped to the ground, clutching it in agony. Cellini rushed forward, kneeling beside him. "Don't move, you've torn it, breathe." The medics came running. The candidate was carried off, his career hanging by a thread. Cellini stood slowly, turning toward Hayes. Her eyes burned with fury I'd never seen in her. "You sacrificed him for pride," she said, quiet but every word a blade. Hayes didn't flinch. He needed to prove he could push through. He proved he'll never serve again. Rodriguez stepped in then, voice like thunder. "Enough, Hayes in my office now." But the damage was done. The line between them wasn't tension anymore. It was war. That night Cellini didn't cry. She didn't rage. She just sat on the couch, staring at the floor, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles went white. Finally, she whispered, "How many more? How many more men have been broken because no one listened?" I didn't know the answer, and that silence crushed me. Because for the first time, I realized the record wasn't what mattered anymore. The record was just the doorway. The real fight wasn't about time on a board. It was about what strength meant, what endurance was worth, what survival demanded. And my sister, the fragile girl I had once thought needed protecting, was standing at the center of that fight, alone. The storm had broken now, and there was no going back. The silence after the injury lingered like smoke. The candidate's scream had faded. The medics had taken him away, but the echo of it stayed, carved into everyone who heard it. Especially Selene. She didn't speak for the rest of that day. She packed up her notes, left the grinder without a word, and walked ahead of me all the way back to the apartment. Her shoulders were stiff, her stride mechanical. Inside, she sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on her knees, face buried in her hands. I'd seen her tired before. I'd seen her angry. But this was different. This was defeat. I sat across from her, the weight between us pressing down until I couldn't breathe. Finally, I whispered, "You did everything you could." Her head lifted slowly. Her eyes were red but dry. "No, Devon, I didn't." "Selene." I saw it, I called it, and Hayes ignored me, but that's not the part I can't live with. Her voice cracked. The part I can't live with is that I let him silence me. I didn't push harder. I didn't step in front of him. I knew what was coming and I let it happen. Her words shattered something in me, because she wasn't wrong. She had seen the future in the tilt of a shoulder, and still, a man's career had ended in the dirt. "You can't carry all of it," I said. Her laugh was hollow, jagged. "That's what I've been doing my whole life, carrying what no one else wanted to, and now it's too much." The room went quiet again except for the distant hum of traffic outside. I wanted to tell her to walk away, to let it go, but I knew better. Selene didn't walk away. The next morning, she was back at Coronado. The tension was thicker than the heat. Hayes avoided her, but his shadow stretched long. The candidates whispered. Some watched her with respect, others with unease. Rodriguez called her into his office. I waited outside, packing. When she came out, her expression was unreadable. "What did he say?" I asked. She handed me a folded sheet of paper. I opened it. It was an official notice. Dr. Selene Hartwell invited to participate in advanced training analysis. Temporary advisory clearance granted. "You're in," I whispered. She nodded slowly, but her eyes didn't shine with pride. "They're giving me a seat at the table," she said, "but at what cost?" That was the question that haunted her in the weeks that followed. Because the more they listened, the more they depended on her. Candidates sought her out daily. Rodriguez leaned on her insights. Even some of the doubters began to adjust their training, grudgingly admitting the results. But Hayes wasn't finished. He started small, snide remarks in briefings. "With all due respect, doctor, combat isn't about yoga poses." Laughter would ripple. Selene would stay quiet. Then came the exclusions. Meetings she wasn't invited to. Drills she wasn't informed about. Subtle ways of reminding her she didn't belong. She endured it all with silence. But at night in the apartment I saw the toll. The sleepless nights, the restless packing, the way her hands trembled when she thought no one was watching. "You're breaking yourself," I told her one night. Her eyes met mine, sharp but weary. "If I don't stay, Devon, nothing changes. If I walk away, Hayes wins. And every candidate who breaks after this, I'll carry them too." She was burning herself alive for a cause that might never accept her. And I, her brother, the protector, could do nothing but watch. But I wasn't innocent, because while she fought her battles, I fought my own. Or maybe I didn't fight at all. My discharge papers still sat on the table. My ankle still ached every morning. My reflection in the mirror looked less like a man and more like a ghost. And the truth I couldn't admit, not to her, not to anyone, was that I envied her. I envied her courage to stand in a place that wanted her gone. I envied her strength to keep fighting even when the fight broke her down. I envied her purpose. Because I had none. One evening, I finally said it out loud. "Selene, I'm done." She looked up from her notes. Done with what? With all of it, the Navy, the fight, the idea that I matter anymore. My voice cracked. "I'm not you. I don't have anything left to give." Her face softened, but her eyes burned. "Don't you dare say that. You're my brother. You matter because you exist. You matter because you've lived what they can't understand. You matter because you're still here." Her words should have lifted me, but they cut, because I didn't believe them, not yet. The days dragged on. The tension with Hayes escalated. Rumors spread, whispers that he was filing complaints, that he was pushing to have her removed. Selene kept showing up anyway, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp, shoulders heavy. One afternoon, after another long session, she walked out of the grinder, her face pale. I caught up to her. "What happened?" She didn't stop walking. "They want me to speak at graduation, to the candidates, to the families, to the brass." "That's good," I said. Her steps slowed. She turned to me, eyes wide with something close to fear. "No, Devon, that's not good. That's everything I never wanted. They don't want me. They want the legend, the symbol, the woman who broke the record, and I don't know if I can live up to her." Her voice cracked. She looked at me desperate. "I don't even know if she's me anymore." And in that moment I saw it. The same fragile truth I had seen in myself. The fear that the story had consumed her. That Selene Hartwell, the woman, had been swallowed by Selene Hartwell, the legend. And the question hung in the air, unspoken but suffocating. Would she keep standing in the fire, or would she walk away before it burned her to ash? Graduation day dawned clear and merciless. The sky over Coronado stretched a deep, endless blue, the kind that makes you feel small. Rows of white chairs lined the grinder. Families gathered, cameras ready, their faces a mix of pride and relief. The candidates stood at attention, leaner, harder, forged by weeks of suffering into something unrecognizable from the men who had first stumbled into training. And at the edge of it all stood Selene. She wore no uniform, she held no rank, but every eye found her. The whispers carried like wind, "That's her. The record breaker, the doctor, the woman who shook Coronado." Rodriguez had asked her to speak. Hayes had objected, of course. He argued it undermined tradition, that it set a dangerous precedent, but Rodriguez hadn't wavered. "They need to hear her," he had said. Now, as the brass took their seats and the ceremony began, I watched Selene shift her weight from one foot to the other. Her hands were clasped in front of her, but I knew the tremor in them. She wasn't afraid of speaking. She was afraid of what they expected her to be. When her name was called, the applause came quick, heavy. She walked to the podium, shoulders squared, chin lifted. But when she looked out at the sea of faces, candidates, commanders, families, the applause faded into silence. Her voice, when it came, wasn't loud, but it carried. "I'm not supposed to be here." A ripple moved through the crowd. "I'm not a SEAL. I'm not a soldier. I'm not one of you, and I won't pretend to be." I saw Hayes shift in his chair, lips curling, but Selene didn't falter. "I came here with my brother during Fleet Week. I saw a course, a record, and I asked a question. Not because I wanted to humiliate anyone, not because I wanted attention, but because I needed to know something about myself." Her hands gripped the sides of the podium now, steadying herself. "All my life, people told me I was fragile, that I needed protection, that I couldn't handle the hard things. But the truth is, strength doesn't always look like what we expect. Sometimes it looks like holding a broken soldier upright. Sometimes it looks like patience when everyone else has given up. Sometimes it looks like getting back up when the world tells you you're finished." Her eyes swept the crowd. I swear you could feel the silence deepen, as if the air itself leaned closer. I broke a record, yes, but the record isn't the point. The point is that every one of you, whether you're a SEAL, a Marine, a Ranger, a civilian, has been told at some point that you're not enough. And you have a choice. You can believe it or you can prove it wrong. Her voice softened then, but somehow carried further. Strength isn't noise, it isn't medals, it isn't even records. Sometimes strength is quiet. Sometimes strength is silent. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. The words settled over the crowd like a weight, heavy, unshakable, true. For a heartbeat, no one moved. And then the applause came, thunderous, relentless, families on their feet, candidates clapping until their hands turned red, even some of the brass nodding, their stern faces softened. Rodriguez stood slowly, clapping with the kind of respect that doesn't need words. And Hayes, for the first time, he didn't argue. He didn't roll his eyes. He just sat there, his hands still, his jaw tight, his eyes locked on her with something he couldn't hide. Not hatred, not even resentment, but recognition. Selene stepped down from the podium, her face calm. She didn't smile. She didn't bask. She simply walked back to her seat as if she just said what needed saying and nothing more. Later, as the families embraced their graduates and the crowd scattered, I found her standing at the edge of the beach. The sun was setting now, painting the water in streaks of orange and gold. "You did it," I said softly. She shook her head. "No, Devon, they did it. I just reminded them of something they already knew." I stood beside her, watching the tide roll in. For the first time in months, I felt a strange calm settle in my chest. "Selene, yeah, you changed me." Her eyes turned to mine, searching. "I thought I lost myself when I lost the Navy. Thought I was nothing without the uniform. But watching you fight for who you are, not for who they wanted you to be, it made me realize I still have a fight too. Maybe not the same one, but mine." Her eyes softened, and for the first time in weeks her smile wasn't tired, it was real. "That's all I ever wanted for you," she whispered. We stood there in silence, the waves hissing at our feet, the sky deepening into twilight. And I understood. The record had never been the story. The story was her. The fragile girl we thought we needed to protect. The quiet warrior who carried others when they couldn't stand. The sister who proved to herself and to the world that strength wears many faces. Sometimes loud, sometimes silent, but always real. And as the sun slipped beneath the horizon, I felt it settle into me. The truth she had lived, the truth she had shown us all. Sometimes the greatest strength doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it doesn't speak at all. It simply acts.